Hi, my name is Hugh Vasquez. I'm with the National Equity Project based out of Oakland, California, and I'm here with my colleague and friend, Tony Smith. Tony, say a couple of words about yourself.
Thank you, Hugh. Appreciate the opportunity to be in dialogue today. I'm coming at this from the perspective of a district superintendent and served as the state superintendent in Illinois from 2015 to 2019, and kind of looking forward to having a conversation about where we go next.
Yeah, so let's get to it, Tony.
Great.
So you and I both know that the system that we are in, the educational system that we are in, is not designed to serve everybody. It actually is designed to produce inequitable results for kids, children, and families. It's designed that way. We've talked about that many times. Let's start with your thoughts about how this system is designed.
I think the way our schools are situated in communities isn't really deeply understood or thought about, that the number of resources that have been both concentrated around some schools and stripped around others, that people kind of hold schools to a kind of universal or common expectation without any reflection on the deep structural inequity that those schools sit in, and that the ways in which we've enacted educational practice has further excluded some kids and their families from the sphere of success. And what we've defined as success is really this notion of whiteness, of kind of white middle class culture. And so even the idea of a gap has reinforced the idea that what the purpose of education is to reproduce whiteness and the white cultural norm, rather than to deeply care for and educate and nurture the unique gifts and talents and well-being of each young person. And the system is designed that way, and it reproduces inequity over and over and over again.
Yeah, we've been working at this for a long time, and we have seen a tremendous increase in awareness on the part of education leaders about what you just said, about how the system is designed, and yet we're still perpetuating the same old. What's going on?
I think there's still pretty deep fear and lack of deep understanding, and there's an inability to really unpack and address the white supremacy that's embedded in structures and systems, and that policies that have privileged some and cost others are still seen as neutral. And so when people start talking about those tragic inequities, they start in the moment and try to address how could we get more for those kids that are behind, as different than the kind of structural analysis to realize that the norm that they're operating in is flawed. And so what's required is a rethinking of the conditions where everybody belongs and is well known and well cared for, and then you move forward from there. And what kind of design, what kind of relationship, what kind of new ways of being, new forming are required in that space, rather than trying to make up for past hurt. You actually have to heal forward together. And that is still some really hard work to do.
So speaking of the moment, we are in a moment right now, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you. The moment of this pandemic, of the COVID-19 pandemic, that has us at a stop. Our systems are at a stop. Our educational system is at a certain stopping point. Like the machinery is not running, at least not in the same way. You wrote a piece that responds to the moment that we're in and what we might be thinking about. So I just want to ask you to think about and talk about the moment that we're in and what this moment could mean for us.
Yeah, so COVID-19, the pandemic, and the ways in which it's playing out, right? Obviously playing out even in terms of the health outcomes and those that are more impacted. This pause, I think, does a couple of things. That it reveals our profound interconnectedness, and that we are in fact part of a global community, and that we have a shared responsibility to take care of one another. I think it also kind of resets back to our humanity. Like, we are, sheltered in place. We're reminded of being human. And so going forward, to me, is we have a system that has hurt so many. I would argue is dehumanizing for adults and for kids, and that the ways in which it's structured around time and organized in these time units, and saying that that's how we're going to get to equity, like these equal time, when what's in the time is so vastly different, that if we can center back on young people and their learning, that we have a chance to do something very different. I do think the idea for me is that that schools themselves, I think we realize more than ever how sacred a space a school is. So the physical place of school is super sacred. The opportunity to do something very different and to know kids, their own unique gifts and what they're interested in, to come back to and understand out of this moment that kids have things that they're thinking about, and we need to come back organized around that.
Yeah. So you said in your article, one thing I'm going to quote: "For too long, we have prioritized seat time over student learning." And then you bring up e-learning. What does that mean? And this concept of we're organized around seat time versus student learning time. If we can come back in a different way where we are organizing around student learning instead of seat time, what would that look like? What would that mean?
Yeah, the opportunity for expanded, extended electronic learning, that the place called school does so much more than just deliver content, right? I think people are understanding food, human interaction, the sense of like relationships, kids, like just the social dimension, the becoming of young people, like developmentally appropriate spaces for them to try stuff out and like be kids together. Like, that's really important. The delivery of content, which we've kind of reduced to these time units and counting time as the way we organize the school day, as different than the opportunities for young people to follow not only their individual passion, but to develop deeper understanding of content. So they can be doing that in the building, out of the building. They can be doing that with kids in their own class. They can do it with instructors who are somewhere else in the world. Like, there's this notion of synchronous and asynchronous. Like, they can be looking at something that's recorded and responding to it. They can be talking to people in a different time zone at the same time, but there are different times in the world. Like, so there are different ways to think about the opportunity of learning if we organize around knowing. Different groups have put together like insight cards, the ways of knowing kids deeply. And if we organize our time and our adult time around knowing kids deeply, and then facilitating their learning, rather than having that tied to an amount of time in a specific classroom, we leverage so many other resources and organize, I think, for the public and common good, young people's learning as the center of school, not the time and the delivery of content as the purpose of school.
Yeah. It feels like we just have a moment to make this happen. Like, this window of being out of the system is going to close, and we're going to be back into the system. What do we need to be doing to get ready to come back differently? Because I hear you about even people, I could hear people saying, yeah, Tony, that's right, and go back and do the same thing. We've got to be doing something now, don't you think, to help us get ready to create different conditions for that kind of learning? What is that?
Yeah, I think they're community conversations. I think that it's also about the leadership moment and people recognizing, so there's a function of change, right? So the current reality is inadequate. You have to have some common understanding about that and a vision for where we want to be. And there are places in the United States that have already made a lot of these moves to competency-based learning, and there are wonderful leaders and thinkers and school people that have designed the day around, you know, basically office hours. The adults have their time. They're there. They're a resource. Like, that is an opportunity to learn from. The pressure to go back and be the same, like, and particularly in equity where context matters so much. If we come back and we start back on page 52, we will have missed something that has been a global phenomenon and young people are coming back with curiosity about. As educators and as people that care deeply about young people developing and coming to know things, we should be planning right now. How will we come back talking about what we've just been through, and what does this mean for the future? How do we design education, design democracy and engagement for a future that everybody fully belongs in?
Yeah, that's what needs to be happening right now then. Those conversations need to be
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, Tony, let's close this segment off. Last thoughts, like what do you want to say that maybe you haven't said, or what do you want to emphasize here?
Just to come back to this profound interconnectedness and the idea that justice and full belonging and equity is something that is a new form, something we must build new, not go back and correct for past mistakes and try to fill gaps. If we're gap gazing now, we're wasting so much energy. This is about generating new, deeper forms of belonging and participation, and young people in their learning need to be right at the center of that.
Well, I look forward to much more. You've been an amazing leader in so many ways. So appreciate what you bring. Let's keep it going.
Thank you, Hugh. Appreciate the time.